What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Ethan.
And my name is Derry. And guys, go check us out on social media. We have a lot of social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and concerns. And we also have extra content you can watch on YouTube mostly, but also on Instagram and TikTok. If you ever wanted to, also if you would please share, subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff, that would help us out a lot too. Spread this content to those who need to hear it. Get it in the algorithm. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, and we are talking today about why Christianity is the greatest thing to happen to anyone, anywhere, of all time. Seriously, Christianity is the best. Objectively, I'm biased, obviously, so is Derry. But I've been thinking about this because I was talking to some people and about the upcoming election and how I was like, man, I just look at the situation in America with politics and I was like, holy cow, it's bleak, right? You think about all the corporatism and how we have no control and it's overwhelming and sad. And then I said, man, guys, I'm so happy I'm a Christian because I have so much hope. You know, the Bible has so much promise of the reality of our world and what it will ultimately come to. And when I said that, someone I was speaking to kind of perked up, like they were surprised that I had hope. And then that got me thinking, oh my gosh, people really don't have hope out here. I kind of knew that theoretically, but when I'm watching someone be like, oh, you have hope, kind of wanting to be like, well, how do I get that? I was like, oh my gosh. And then so the last couple of weeks I've been just reeling on this idea that man, Christianity is actually the greatest. And how fortunate that we're Christians. How thank you God that I'm saved. It's amazing. And the more I just am thinking about it, the more I'm like, wow, yeah, in every capacity, Christianity is the greatest. One, for my own life, but also then you can extrapolate out to the rest of the world and how Christianity has benefited everyone everywhere it goes. And so we're going to talk about that and look at some statistics and studies maybe, and as well just talk about our experience as Christians and how it's the best thing ever, and then kind of get into well, why is this? What makes Christianity so special? And one of the answers, spoiler, is that it's the real religion. It's the only one that's correct. So there's some confidence there. But Derry, is there anything you want to say while I go get my stack of books for my computer so I don't look like I'm continuing going up and down, up and down?
Sure. Funny enough that you say that we have the hope, right? It seems like a lot of people when they're talking about how they don't like Christianity, especially I guess it's not fair, totally. A lot of people critique Christianity and say, well, you guys have so much existential dread of the end times are coming, and if you grow up a Christian, you've seen the Left Behind movies and you might have been afraid of the rapture and stuff like that. But for a lot of people, there's tons of existential dread because the only thing keeping humans alive is nothing. If humans do well, we do well, but if we don't, we don't. And there's nothing that's going to come to save you, or at least on maybe a more naturalistic worldview, which is what a lot of people have. There's nothing coming to save you. There's no cosmic justice or power or afterlife. And so this is just what it is. And when it ends, it ends. And so for some people, that might be numbing. And you might think, okay, well, yeah, if it is what it is and it ends when it ends and you're kind of nihilistic about it, then if the world ends, then whatever. That's just what it is. I won't be here to care about it because I'll be dead. But on the other hand, most people don't live their life that way because even if that's your worldview, you got people you love and you got things you like to do and there's things you want to stick around for. And you don't want anybody to suffer. And so even if you're dead, you really have a lot of people have this dread of oh my gosh, if this certain president doesn't get elected, or if the economy doesn't improve, or if we go to war with these people, or if these people stop warring or whatever, life is just going to be over and the world's just going to hell so fast every day, all this terrible stuff's happening. But for Christians, we don't have such a myopic perspective. It's really easy for us to be hey, Christ is king. The gospel is going to be true no matter what. And if you guys because you guys have your eyes fixed on the world and the state of the world, your emotional state, your conversations, all of that is going to be fixed on how terrible things are going, when all of our conversations usually are going to be hopefully for you, if you're a Christian, you're waking up every morning and you're thanking God for being alive, for the gift of today, because you're not promised tomorrow, and you starting your day every day with the presence of the Lord and the goodness that he provides for you. And when you start your day like that, there's hope, there's thankfulness, there's community, all those kind of things. And, it'd suck to wake up every day and just look at the news cycle and have that be your motivation for the day. That would just be super demotivating. So, yes, Christians have the most hope.
Yeah, and even what you just said about when you started that, saying oh, how terrible to live in dread of this God that forces you to love him or else he punishes you for not choosing him, which is such a gross mischaracterization. Someone in our comments said that. I can't remember if it was like on my personal YouTube channel or this podcast channel. Um, Shameless plug, go follow my personal. I just started dropping videos on my personal page. Everyday Gospel, Ethan Peterson, check it out. Only have 14 subs, so go subscribe. Give me 1,000 subs. Make fake accounts, bots, all that stuff. Trying to play the system here. Just kidding. But no, someone said, yeah, like, I think I was making a video about atheism or something like that, and they're like, what a sad thing to always be in constant dread of this thing, and they're like trying to like make it look like I'm living in constant fear of judgment of God, and I was like, oh man, like no, you don't understand. Like we are totally looking at this in different angles because the reality is that like everyone has to deal with the evil of the world. It's just kind of about who's dealing with it the best, who has the best answer for it. And not only like who has the best answer like philosophically, because I think it matters kind of how the answers make you feel to some degree, but that doesn't change reality. Like someone might find uh maybe nihilism or atheism makes them feel emotionally okay because it's kind of like, well, nothing matters anyway, so it's fine. That doesn't make it true, right? And so just because Christianity provides a lot of hope, that's not what makes it true. What makes it true is all the other reasons Christianity is true that we don't have time to get into on this podcast. But man, I just get so excited, like recognizing, like, yeah, I have so much peace and hope and purpose when I wake up in the day that I'm like, do other people feel this way? Because this is what motivates me to want to share the gospel. Where I'm like, do people not wake up with a distinguished purpose that they know, like? Do they not wake up? I know they don't if they're not Christian, but it's like they don't wake up with the confidence that they have peace with the ultimate creator of the universe. I was just talking to someone the other day who said that they always are thinking about eternity and heaven and religion and which one's right. And they're always thinking about it. And they're like, I probably think about it more than you. And my answer was, you're right, you do, because I have peace. I don't need to question it every day. Like, I got the answer. I'm content, And I'm just like, man, like that's another thing that's so amazing about the Gospels. We have confidence towards God, and then we can approach God in boldness, knowing He loves us. And that's pretty dope thing to have, That's a good situation to be in. So that's some of the experiential side, which we can come back to in a little bit. But let's go into the historic stuff. Derry, you want to start us off with some of the historical statistic things about how Christianity has benefited the world in comparison to other religions, or maybe just as a standalone study?
Sure, yeah, we can go back and forth with different things too as we think about them. But I think one of the first things that comes to my mind when I think about how Christianity has impacted the world, honestly, is one of the smaller ways I think we've impacted the world, because we can talk about a lot of different topics, which we will. But honestly, when it comes to arts and music, especially plays, movies, all that kind of stuff, all of that was started by Christians originally. If you study just the history of music in general, if you ever in a college class, you watch a video about it online. Back in the day, it's not like there's YouTube or there's Spotify everywhere and you can just listen to your favorite band. It's like if you have some way to sing, you have a good voice, or you have a musical instrument around, you could play for yourself, but there's not all these like touring artists everywhere. And this is all over history, right? Not just like recent history. So there's no money going into like people or musicians, right? You got to work in the farm or the field or whatever to provide for yourself, and then you can trade with other people or give food to other people, whatever you want to do. But there's no like commonwealth or people paying for music necessarily in most cases, right? Unless you're like a king, maybe you pay for someone to play for you, or you force someone to pay for you if you have slaves or something. I don't know. That's something people did a lot. So, but there's no like just production of general songs people know. I'm sure there's like folk tales that people will sing together, but no one's like, there's no record labels. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that originally is started by Christians. So you have, the center of society back in the day, the church, and the church would create music for its congregants to sing to the Lord. And that music was so popular that it got spread all around to everybody, because a lot of people were Christians. And because there was a lot of money going towards the church to make these songs, they were produced and everybody knew them. And a lot of the original composers most of them, if not all of them, were composers that were hired by the church to make music. And so whether they're Christian or not, most of them were. But whether they're Christian or not, most of them, the famous ones, are hired by churches to create masses, right? Music for mass. And that's where we have a lot of our most famous classical songs. You could listen to some of the original masses and you'd be like, what the heck? I know that song. That's weird. So it evolves from there, and it still is mostly Christian influenced, funded, all that kind of stuff for a really long time, even through the beginning of American history until really modern history. Most of arts, entertainment is funded by the church and by Christians in general. Yeah, pretty cool fact. If you like music or you like movies or entertainment, most of it brought to you by Christians. Not anymore, but used to be.
Yeah, that's so good because that is such an important part of life is beauty and joy. And I think that's the reason Christians have been on the forefront is because we have a God that is creative and he's like, hey, you guys should create. And he wants us to use our gifts to create things that are beautiful. And so we have this, it's like how like kids are so much more confident to do something when they have the permission of their parents to do it. Like a little boy maybe jumping off the top of a little shed onto some pile of wood chips or something, right? They might be timid, but as soon as their dad's like, oh, go try it, let's see what you can do, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, and they're like so much more amped to go do it. That's kind of how Christians are with God, where like, I kind of want to do this thing that I think is super dope, and God's probably like, yeah, try it. If it brings me glory, and try it, just see what happens. And also, art takes vulnerability, and vulnerability takes safety, and Christians have the most safety. We have a cosmic and relational and spiritual safety with God. So how much room to be vulnerable and expressive in art do we have? And then we just craft our skills and it just snowballs. So that's a great point. And then there's other ways too we can talk about, like the education systems in historically. I don't know about. I don't really have any names. I think Princeton's in Europe. Is that in England? Is that where Princeton is?
Pretty sure, yeah.
So Princeton's the only one I think that...
But you can talk about every American institution.
Yeah, pretty much. All the Ivy Leagues started by Christians. Name a few. Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, Princeton. Shout out England, I guess. Rutgers, Dartmouth. All these Ivy League schools, which I don't... Maybe the last two aren't, I'm not sure. But every Ivy League school was started by Christians because the Christian worldview requires valuing the individual and loving God and wanting to know more about him, which requires learning, which requires institutions to learn. It's an amazing snowball.
Yeah. Original education, like the beginning of it, of like a populace that's educated, because really it was just the rich that were educated before. But the origins of an education system that benefits just the general populace comes from Christianity. But even it goes back to like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century with the early church, because they wanted people to be able to read the scriptures for themselves. They wanted people to be able to know the Bible, so they had monastic schools around the 4th century, so people that wanted to become monks and stuff like that, right? And they had, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like the catechism schools, catechastic or something like that, which is just like a confirmation school, right? So you go to learn about the basics of doctrine, about theology. You learn how to read the scriptures. So a lot of those schools are originally started 2nd, 3rd, 4th century for just the average layperson to be able to know the scriptures, know about God, and love him. So that was really, just as music was the like catalyst for a lot of just the broad populace to be able to learn how to read and become educated. And of course, for a really long time, almost nobody was super educated, super literate, but it was the beginning of a lot of just general population becoming literate, becoming educated. And as education continued, Christians were even on the pioneers of having inclusive education, diversity-wise, and for women. Women for a really long time were not allowed to learn. You can see it from Paul's writings. Paul allows women to learn, which is a pretty taboo thing for the time, and allows slaves to learn, all that kind of stuff. And as you get farther along in history, women are still oppressed for a really long time. But slowly you see some of the first women getting doctorate degrees in theology and in philosophy, all stemming from Christianity and religion in general, offering that to women and believing that women were also smart and intelligent and just as much as men. Although it did take a very long time, that equality was found and brought about by Christians.
Yeah. And if you've ever read a book, you can thank Christians for that. Christians were the ones who invented the printing press, this need for people to read the Bible and be educated. It was like, hey, Martin Luther's like, wait a second, everyone should be able to read the Bible. And then he's like, how do we make it possible for everyone to read the Bible? And then a couple people maybe around him were like, if there was a way to put words en masse on paper and just get that out really quick, and instead of having to handwrite everything, we could get out a ton of Bibles. And so what happens? You got to think about that, and then you got engineers, and they're like, oh, we can make metal into shapes of letters backwards, and then just cover it in ink and stamp it. They're like, oh my gosh, we can make a whole stamp of a page. And then Christians were the one who created the printing press, and then they just started en masse producing Bibles. And the idea was, if we get people to read the Bible, they will know God better, and they will love God better, and it will help them in their soul. So let's get them Bibles. And then you're like, okay, we got people Bibles. And then you're like, oh, wait, these people don't know how to read. And so you're like, okay, let's teach them how to read. Let's teach them how to read using the Bible. So you do that. And then as people learn how to read, they just become smarter in every capacity. They can understand more literature. So, I learned to read because I want to read the Bible. Oh, now I can read these books that only the elite were reading. Oh, I can read these books about math or literature or science and all these things. Oh, now I also know how to write. And there are tons of studies of how writing helps the brain and helps grow. And so now people are writing and being creative with their writing. And now you just have like economic booms, societal booms. There's like so many studies that you can look at that analyze the societal growth and expansion of Europe around the time when Christianity and printing press was created versus other parts of the world where they didn't have that, and their economic increase wasn't as fast as the West, right? And then Christians, being evangelistic and loving God and obeying the Great Commission, are like, okay, let's go teach other people the Bible. Let's get them saved. And then you're like, okay, we got them saved. Now we need to teach them to read the Bible. Oh, so we got to teach them to read. So now you're teaching more people to read, and then more people are learning how to read and write, so more economic booms happening in other countries now. And so we just see across the world historically, as missions, specifically Protestant Christian missions, expand, so does education, so does health and hygiene and life expectancy and all these things. And then that bleeds over into other areas. You could say like different industries of business and art and entertainment and all that stuff. People are more educated and healthier and live longer. They're going to do more things, and it's going to be better at large.
And there are many famous scientists. Like if you like your smartphone, if you like flying, if you like the combustion engine, if you like all those things, like you can thank mostly Christian scientists for doing that. Just to name a few, you got Isaac Newton, famous physicist, right? Responsible for the laws of motion, for calculus in general. So, most things thankful for calculus, right? Like AI and
what a genius. He discovered calculus. Oh my gosh.
Pretty cool guy. Blaise Pascal, probability theory. Yeah, I didn't either. Robert Boyle, one of the fathers of modern chemistry, right? And then classic Francis Bacon, just the father of, no big deal, the scientific method, for all the people out there who only believe in science and what the scientific method can do for you. The founder of that was Christian, so pretty interesting paradox for your worldview there.
Yeah, that's hilarious that so many atheists... Yeah, dude, that's hilarious. So many atheists are like anti-religion because like, I'm only science-based. And it's like, do you know who started these major studies? It wasn't atheists. And like, objectively, the atheist worldview doesn't have a compelling reason why they should care about sciences. If nothing matters, if nothing created everything, and then you're going to die one day and go back to being nothing, who cares how everything works? But when you have a God that you're in love with who created everything, and then he gives you the ability and permission to just go learn as much as you can about what he created, like, that's cool. That's super beautiful. That's amazing. That's meaningful. That, oh yeah, a God loves me and he created this, and he's given us abilities to learn how to understand this and put words to it, and like all the equations we can You discover math. You don't invent math. You can like recognize, oh, this is consistent. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And even for people who say like, oh, but what about Charles Darwin? I'm pretty sure he converted at the end of his life. I could be wrong about that, but I want to say I'm like 92% sure he converted at the end of his life. Sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty, some Wi-Fi problems. Yeah, basically what I was saying is I was on a rant about something that I kind of forgot the end of. Probably just, I know I finished my thought before I recognized that you froze, but I think just in general, like the reason Christians have a reason to explore this stuff where other religions don't. Um, and so we can keep going down this historical understanding. I'd like to circle back to the experiential, and then discuss kind of questions people have for pushback. Like, well, one, we can talk about why it is that we think Christians have all this hope that we talk about, and then what am I saying? And then pushback of things people might say in response to that.
I mean, yeah, there's a few different aspects we can talk about when it comes to history. I don't know if you want me to list all of them off or you want to keep going back and forth.
You can go ahead and list them for a bit. Yeah.
Alrighty. We have many, many things. Many qualities, I think, that would cause Christians to do these things, but just generally, as a quick overview, beyond education and music and the arts and all that kind of stuff, you have, pretty much all of human rights. The beginning of most humanitarian organizations that you could think of, Samaritan's Purse, the Red Cross, World Vision, Salvation Army. You can go on and on. Like pretty much all of the organizations that are going into all of the places in the world currently and for the last, however many years, helping people out. Before those organizations existed, you had churches in general around many places trying to feed the poor, take care of the hungry, the widows, the orphans, all that kind of stuff. You can thank Christians for orphanages, for health care in general, for hospitals. Christians started all of those things historically, and still are large proponents and supporters of those things, of hospitals, orphanages. I mean, I can't imagine you go to an orphanage nowadays and not half of the staff be Christian. You know what I mean? Or at least have the foundation of that orphanage be Christian, or have some kind of Christian name, saintly name, something like that. You know what I mean? We're also... Go ahead, Ethan, yeah.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. That's all.
Yeah. Beyond that, and just like the human rights categories, you have the abolition of slavery, the fight for equal rights, both two biblical things that a lot of Christians fought for, even though, and we'll talk about this at the end, even though a lot of Christians did support slavery and not having equal rights, especially for women and for men, you have ultimately Christians deciding to get rid of those things and the main proponents of those things being done away with, segregation and not allowing women to vote or women having rights, all that kind of stuff, was due to Christians trying to get those things done away with. So Christians were ultimately responsible for all of that. You have names like William Wilberforce, and you can go on and on with all the proponents of these things. So yeah, I think human rights, anti-slavery, diversity, inclusion, all that kind of stuff, all product of Christianity over the last thousands of years.
Yeah, that's good. I love the points about equal rights, civil rights, ending all that. That's so true. And so, yeah, let's go. Let's jump ahead then to a question that people might ask, which is one of those things that, while we're on topic, the slavery. Christians abolished it, but also there are Christians defending it. How do we make sense of that? How can we say Christianity is good for the world when people who claim to be Christians were defending slavery? Thoughts?
You want to talk about these questions at the end or right now?
Well, just right now for the slavery one, just because it's come up.
Okay.
And it's a good time to address it.
A lot of people bring up slavery and war. A lot of violence and stuff, they say, is a proponent of, or religions are a proponent of those things. Like a lot of atheists love to say the cause of all war is religion and all that kind of stuff, which I think is insane. If you look at the statistics, I know I'm on a tangent on war, but if you look at the statistics, Wesley, I forget his name, but the leader of Canadian apologetics or whatever, posted a little synopsis of like the history of war the other day, and there's literally thousands of wars that have been started in history, that are non-religious affiliated. There's been, I believe, 59 that are caused by all. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's 59 started by non-Islamic religions, and then 63 caused by Islamic religions. So I don't know what you want to do with that information, but almost all of the wars that have been started have been by non-religious groups, organizations, all that kind of stuff. Most wars have nothing to do with Christianity or religion in general.
Yeah, it just seems like thinking about the big wars that we know about, I'm not sure that Attila the Hun had any religious motivations. I think he just wanted to take over the world. I don't think Hitler had any religious motivations. Maybe he had some twisted demonic, like, oh, the Jews killed Jesus, so we gotta kill the Jews mentality. He thought he was doing good. Maybe. Doubtful, though. The Turks in World War One maybe had some religious stuff against the Armenians because Armenians were Christians. I don't know the specifics about that. But yeah, also, it seems like people who like to say religion restarts all the wars totally ignore that communism is responsible for 100 million deaths in total in modern history, and a lot of that through wars and genocide. Like the Khmer Rouge also not religious. Just think about like recent history. That was more like they want Cambodia to be an agricultural society. It had nothing to do with religion. Maybe it could be like we want to go back to more Buddhist roots. But I don't think that's the case. But yeah. Now, what else? Where else do we want to go with history? Is there any more history we want to cover?
Well, let's not forget about slavery really fast. I think.
We went on a tangent for war.
Yeah, I mean, of course we can do what we have done, and we can do more episodes in the future on slavery. Whether the Bible is a proponent of it, all that kind of stuff. We can go back and forth forever, and there's many debates you can watch online of this. Our position, me and Ethan, is that the Bible does not promote slavery, and that when God says at the very beginning of creation that he creates human beings equal, that gives value to all life, and so any kind of oppressive slavery, whatever you want to call it or have it look like, is going to be bad, right? Whatever devalues the individual is going to be bad. So a lot of people, especially in America, which is our early history, most people listening to this probably, misrepresented the Bible. Mostly they wanted to do what they were going to do, right? So it wasn't that they like read the Bible and were like, oh, we can have slaves, let's do it. It wasn't like that. It's like they had slaves, and then the people that were Christian justified themselves having slaves with certain Bible verses that they were taking out of context or just not understanding the meaning of. And so some people nowadays will say, well, the Bible supports slavery. We don't think so. We have other episodes on that, like I said. But a lot of early American Christians use the Bible to justify it, which we denounce, the church denounces, all that kind of stuff. And Christians are responsible for getting rid of those bad interpretations and getting rid of slavery in America in general. So that's, I think, most of the things I would say on the topic in defense of it.
Yeah, it's kind of sounds like that slavery to Christianity a couple hundred years ago in America is or can be what like abortion is to Christianity nowadays, where it seems like there's a group of people who want to call themselves Christians who might be pro-choice, or you could also take the LGBTQ topic and be like, there's a group of Christians or people who want to say they're Christians who are affirming, and the majority of Christians would say, no, you can't be affirming and Christian and doing this. Like, Christians can't be affirming. Christians can't be pro-choice. You can't do these things. But they might say, oh no, well, we're Christians and we're going to do it anyways. Whereas that might be similar back in the day where it's like true Christians were like, you can't own people. And they're like, oh no, but we can. And they just twist scripture and take it out of context to do that. So that could be a good comparison where we wouldn't say Christianity is pro-abortion now. So we shouldn't say Christianity was pro-slavery then. It was something they were dealing with in their culture, and probably a lot of people fell victim to it because it was convenient if they already owned slaves and it was like, oh, I don't want to give that up, whatever. So it was probably also convenient, and they had their idols.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
Just some thoughts, and yeah, absolutely terrible, horrendous atrocity that happened that Christians, fought for freedom for. And just continuing on this thought about how Christians have helped in the whole world and historically, there's so many places where Christian missions have traveled that one bring education like we talked about and also health like we talked about. And what's amazing is a lot of these significantly help women in society and women of lower status in society, because the Bible looks at everybody as equal and says everyone is worthy of proper education and love and has a divine value placed on them by God, intrinsic value, that we're not going to say, oh, just the men can go to school or just the men can do this. Like, women can do this too. And so in a lot of places that we would call the global south now, historically, women have been benefited by Christians. So that's another thing which is funny, because a lot of people think Christianity is sexist and hurts women and it like pushes women down. But we actually see the opposite result in when we see missions spread throughout the world, that women are empowered. And right now in the Middle East, who's predominantly leading the church movement? It's women. So that's another thing I think that
crazy.
People misunderstand about Christianity, is that, oh, it's an oppressive patriarchy religion that hurts the marginalized and women. It's like, no, actually it helps all of those. Like, men have always been like the quote unquote best in society historically. Like, historically society favors men. Men were the one who had jobs before women could vote. Only men could vote. In way before America, like back in the Bible days, the man was the head of the household, and that meant like, oh, everyone should serve the guy in charge. And so just throughout historically, men have benefited a lot by just being men in society. And Christianity comes along and says, no, you treat women and children the same as men. Men, you who are head of the household, who think you're supposed to be served, you're actually supposed to take the position of Christ and serve those. So it actually brings low the person in society who like historically has been propped up as like, I don't know, the best, or what society exists for and what the family unit exists to serve. And it brings men low, and it says, no, you're going to serve those around you humbly, like Christ served the church and gave himself up for them. And then he elevates women and marginalized and children and says, like, he looks at a child. Jesus looks at a child and says, like, if you don't have faith like a child, you can't enter heaven. If you lead one of these astray, it's better that you be thrown in the sea with a rock tied around your ankles. Like, Jesus elevates the people that the historic society would downplay. And it's amazing. And this is still true today. And so it's super cool to see Christianity just continue throughout the years to be the best thing ever.
Yeah. So in recap of all the history of how Christianity has helped the world, you can look at pretty much any aspect of life and society, whether it's science, the inventions that we have, all the things that we love today, all the electricity that we get, the Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff, Bluetooth, whatever you want to call it, or whatever you want to point to. Christians responsible for, right? You want to say thank you for the healthcare. You want to say thank you for, well, most people don't say thank you for government, but the creation of our political systems that aren't hopefully trying to kill us every day. It depends on who you are and what you believe, but hopefully the government is trying to do good things for us, even if politicians are corrupt, right? The institution of human rights, humanitarianism, all these kind of things, right? All from Christians, all sponsored by Christians, started, supported, funded, whatever it is, by Christians originally. So I think it's pretty unequivocal that Christianity has been a giant net positive for every human for the last thousands of years.
Great. And
one
now,
good reason to
Derek.
believe in Christianity.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. You cut off. I didn't realize you were still speaking.
I just had one great reason to believe in Christianity.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so now experientially, I've been, like I said, I mentioned this earlier, I've just been thinking about how Christians just like, I'm just like, it's so much better. It's so much better than anything I've ever done. I've done different, very like minor drugs in the past, like pretty basic stuff. And it's like, oh man, being a Christian's way better than smoking weed. Being a Christian's way better than getting drunk. Like, and I don't say that like, oh, it's better, guys, believe it. And like trying to convince people to like not give up those ways. No, like I'm being so serious. Like I love being a Christian more than I ever loved ever being on any of those substances, which when I was on them I enjoyed them. Right? It's like I love being a Christian so much more because the benefits just crazy. Like maybe you don't have like the same feeling you like physically have when you're drunk or stoned, but it's like also those things they don't last and they're not fun. Like after a little bit of them, after you have a number of them, you get one hangover and tell me that drinking's fun. You know, have one of those. They suck. But just like man, like you get to have peace with the creator of the universe. You get to have confidence that you can talk to God. And then beside, like I just said, there's not a lot of like psychedelic experiences, quote unquote, or psychotropic experiences, but there are real spiritual experiences which are amazing that you don't get to choose when you have them. But when they happen, you can't explain it. Like I've had some weird situations where I'm like, wow, this definitely feels better than any drug I've ever been on. Like the Holy Spirit just was like falling on me and I was just like, I don't know what to do about this, but this is amazing. And I was just in a moment of prayer and this thing happened. And so that's like a small benefit, but like the biggest benefit I think is like you have peace with God, peace with the universe, confidence. Like the fact that I wake up every day and I know everything I've ever done that's bad is forgiven. I don't have shame. That's probably the words I'm looking for. Freedom from shame. I know so many people who are ashamed of the things they've done in their life and they think they have to get cleaned up before they come to Jesus. And I'm like, no. Like I'm trying to like show them like you don't have to, that's the opposite. You know, you come to Jesus and get clean. You don't get clean and then come to Jesus. I'm trying to convince them of this, but I'm like, man, like I am so thankful that I don't wake up with shame every day and overthinking these, like my life on to make this decision right. Did I do this right? I'm like, I'm following God. I pray and ask him what to do. He directs me and I do it. So then when I'm doing my job and I'm like just doing a pretty menial task, people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing this job. And they're like, is that pretty fun? I'm like, I mean, it's not really fun, but I have purpose in it. Like the purpose of me doing my job is that God told me to do this job. So I'm going to do this job, right? Like there's purpose, there's hope, there's freedom from shame, there's confidence, and in life there's immense gratitude. And like a lot of people, gratitude's really big today in today's culture. Like, oh, practice gratitude, I meditate, I'm just grateful. I'm like, who are you showing gratitude towards? What's the emphasis? What's the object of your gratitude? Towards chance? Can't be grateful.
Trying to be
that.
as Christian as they can without worshiping God.
Yeah, dude, come on. Like, you're just gonna tell me like I'm gonna do all these things that Christians say to do, but not admit there's a God? Get out of here. Just confess that Christ is Lord. Just give up. You know, you're not gonna win this battle. It's like, like, oh man, I love it. I'm like, I get to be so grateful towards God, and even in hardships when things happen, because we will have hardships. You know, Christianity is better, but that doesn't mean you're immune from hard times. When you go through them, they give meaning. Like you are being shaped into the image of Christ. When you go through sufferings, it says of the apostles that they counted it. They got persecuted and then rejoiced because they counted themselves worthy to suffer like Christ. So even in our suffering is not meaningless. We have purpose. It's a great time. Like, are you kidding me? Who else has meaning in their suffering when they're going through like grief or pain or confusion and angst and worry? And they're like, what's the purpose of this? And like the Christian can say, my purpose like this is become like Christ and become submitted to Christ. I know that. The non-Christian's like, I don't know, it sucks. And that's why a lot of people walk around depressed and lonely, because I'm like, oh man, you don't have God. I feel like I'm getting this idea in my mind, or like this like attitude of like kind of like boasting, like I'm boasting in how great it is to be a Christian, which I think is fine because Paul says to boast in Christ. But then I'm like, oh, but this is available for everyone. And so when I see people who are like wanting that, I'm like, you can have it. Like that's the greatest thing too, is it's free. You can have it right now. You want it? Come on, I'll introduce you. You know, I got the plug.
Pretty cool.
You got any thoughts on the experiential side of the benefits of Christianity?
Yeah, I think if anybody needs just like 2 or 3 very simple reasons on why you should be a Christian, more socially, experientially, like Ethan was talking about, just think about the concept of love and acceptance and grace in almost every other worldview and religion, right? Included in worldviews, obviously. There are things people can do to you or believe themselves, especially in our culture today, where as soon as they start to believe those things or as soon as they've harmed you or something like that, all of a sudden you cannot associate with that person, you're not friends with them. If they're family, they're no longer family, and you don't love them, right? And just from a lot of those worldviews, whether a naturalistic worldview or a different religion, the amount of friends that I have that are Buddhist or Hindu, Muslim for sure too, love all my friends that have those religions that are those, but I have very many friends that I went to college with, that I'm friends with now, that have been completely cut off from their families because of either what they believe, how they act, or something like that. And because they have done something or believe something, they no longer are allowed to be a part of their family, like the closest unit they could have. With Christians, we are called to love everybody and accept everybody. That doesn't mean that you have to say that what they're doing is good, right? Like we say all the time, but you have to love and accept and give grace for people when they do bad things. We believe in rehabilitation, right? God believes in rehabilitation, the story of the Old Testament over and over. God disciplining and trying to correct Israel and getting them to come and follow after him. And that's the Christian story too. We have sanctification, right? We try to become more and more like Christ every time we fall. We remember, like Ethan said, we don't have to be perfect, but every time we fall, we get up knowing that we're forgiven and we continue to walk towards Christ and trying to emulate him and be like him. And so for people around us as Christians, when they harm us, we're called to forgiveness, right? And we want to be forgiving towards them because we still believe that they're made in the image of God and that they can be better, right? That they can look like Christ. Whether they're Christian or not, they can become Christian. We believe in forgiveness for everybody, right? It's a hope that everybody could have. And so when it comes to Christians, we try. I mean, of course, Christians don't do a good job sometimes, and there's lots of people who do a really bad job a lot of the time. And there's lots of people who call themselves Christians who aren't and continue to do a terrible, hateful job. But we're not talking about those people, right? In general, the Bible teaches to love people, to accept them and to give grace towards them. What more classic example do you need than to turn your other cheek, what Jesus said, right, to his disciples, to turn your other cheek to people that have harmed you, right? To give a tunic to somebody who, like a shirt or whatever in today's terms, to give the shirt off your back to somebody if they steal something from you. Like ask if they need more things. Like, why are you stealing from me? Like, is there more things I can provide for you and help you with? Generosity in general, right? Like Christians are called to all of these things. Like what better kind of a person could you ask for than someone who doesn't immediately excommunicate someone from their life in every way that they can as soon as they, don't like the same YouTube video as them. Like that's insane. Like that's actually crazy. Like as soon as I don't vote for the person you want me to vote for, then all of a sudden I can never talk to you ever again. Like that's insane. Like actual insanity. And I know some Christians are responsible for doing some of these things too, but they shouldn't. They shouldn't do these things is the point, right? Because the God we believe in has commanded us to love and to accept and forgive, to give grace, just like we have been offered all of those things by Christ himself. So I think those are some of the best reasons why you should become a Christian if you're not already. And if you're not operating in those ways, why you should start.
Yeah, I think that's great, what you said about the forgiveness, because I think, forgiveness just does so much. If you're not living out of a place of forgiveness, you're either like pushing down all those wrongs. Like you might be like, oh, it's fine, ha ha ha. And then you're not dealing with it, so you're pushing it down. Or you're doing other things with these pains that you have, and whether you're becoming numb and closing off your emotions and your hearts to people over the course of a long time, or you're growing in resentment, forgiveness just keeps you so free. It's crazy. It's like, come on, nothing's better than that. And then personal growth as well. Christianity demands that you lay down your life to serve God and others. And so it's this idea of personal sacrifice that benefits your community and the people around you. So you just become a better person. And it's like a joy to serve. So rather than being angry that your spouse didn't do the dishes the way you wanted, you're just like, whatever, or like angry at this person who's driving ridiculously. Like, you're like, yeah, okay, who cares? Like, you're just like you're less quick tempered. I think the longer you walk with the Lord, because the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, self control, gentleness, and did I say peace? Probably. Um,
Yes.
and like the personal sacrifice that leads to personal growth, I think is amazing because there's just like things I see people deal with that I'm just like, man, if you were a Christian, this would have been dealt with like maybe year one of being a Christian in discipleship classes, and you could just avoid a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of entitlement that leads to more pain. Like, it's just easier and more relaxed. It's like just chill. It's like I'm just relaxed. I'm just hanging out. I think the hard parts of being a Christian is standing up for righteousness in the face of unrighteousness, standing up for people who can't speak for themselves, and there's a lot of pain that comes with being a Christian. Of you feel the pain of others, you feel the pain of knowing people aren't Christians, and just the sadness and grief you feel when you're like, oh man, like I know you could live such a better life, but you're not, and it's just like it hurts because I love you, but all that pain that is in the Christian life is associated with love. So even your pain has meaning, which I think is really beautiful. And there was a couple other things. Said forgiveness. I talked about purpose. Talked about sacrifice, personal growth, responsibility. You just learn to be responsible. You got to be a good steward. Jesus is like, hey, you got to be a good steward. So then I got to figure out what that means. And then you get your life together. And then you're like, oh man, this is great. You also learn to not be so impulsive. We live in a very impulsive society, but we got the Proverbs, the wisdom of Proverbs to guide us. And it's like, hey, you can't get rich quick. Wealth is made over a long, 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 long time. And it's like, okay, then you just learn patience. You just learn the way life should be, and you obey God and listen to commands. And it's just like, wow, this is amazing. It's like everyone wants a how-to on life and how to do adulting, quote unquote. It's like, read the Bible, man. Just like become a Christian, submit yourself to God, and He'll teach you everything you need to know.
Bible man.
What's that?
Bible man.
Bible man. Read the Bible, man. Also watch Bible man.
Bible man.
Christian Jedis.
If you think about it, literally, it's the best. But if you think about it, there is no reason for any of these virtues outside of Christianity. A lot of people will say, well, we agree with those. We like those. We can have those in our lives because we live in a very Christian-influenced world, as we talked about with our history portion of this episode, right? But just because you have those things doesn't mean you have a justification within your worldview to own them or say that you should do them to somebody else, right? Because if you have a naturalistic worldview, one of many, you have no justification for doing anything, right? Anybody can act however they want, and however they act is just natural to how they've been wired, right? Through evolution. So there's no ultimate God behind the evolution. And so, like within Christian versions, so even in those cases, you have no real reason because everything is just natural. Every action is natural. And so you could say, well, maybe philosophically I should do these things because this reason or that reason. But someone could just come across with whatever else they think, and they're just as right as you are because there's no ultimate truth, right? If you think about other religions, right? You have Buddhism. Nothing really ultimately matters in Buddhism because everybody's going to be a part of the oneness eventually. And so there's no reason to really care for anybody or do anything virtuous. Right? In Hinduism, there's caste systems. You're literally supposed to ignore and oppress people. It's hard to say, but like that's just the reality of many cultures that follow that belief system. If you think about Islam, I have tons of friends who are no longer allowed to associate with their families because of what they think, how they act, what they believe, all those kind of things, right? Like you have almost no other religions that operate like Christianity does that gives you these values and the foundation for them, the foundation for these ethics. Like Christianity has given the world historically so much and still offers the world the most, right? If you look at who gives the most money, if you look at where all of these foundational things are from, like Christians are the ones who take care of people, the ones who love and are accepting. And I know a lot of people will say, and we'll get into this, I'm sure in a second, I know a lot of people will say, well, that's not my experience with Christians. I'm sorry that hasn't been your experience, but that is what the Bible teaches, right? So whether or not Christians display that, at least the ones that you've met, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't still become a Christian and start to obey those things and be the better version or the true version of Christianity that wasn't given to you, right? That wasn't shown to you. Because to truly emulate Christ is to do those things, right? And so if you met a Christian that didn't emulate Christ, then that's just a bad Christian, right? And of course, we're all not going to emulate Christ all the time. And so there is that. But I think that's not a good explanation or not good reason why you shouldn't be a Christian. Just because you haven't seen it emulated correctly to you doesn't mean that it's not still the right way to live and it's not still true.
Yeah, that's great. And that's getting into the last part we want to talk about. It's like, why can we make these claims? And like you just summed it up, it's the only worldview that gives value to everyone equally. That's it. Like if you just objectively look at all the teachings, people like to talk about Buddhism a lot. Like, oh, I just like really mess with Buddhism or this or that. It's just like, karma, all these things. I'm like, you guys like, if especially when Western people like, I really like Buddhism. I'm like, you don't understand Buddhism because it's a life of getting rid of attachments, and you have an iPhone. Go throw everything out and go be homeless. Like you have no attachments. Then go live in the woods, so you have no attachments. Like you're not Buddhist. You just like the idea of what you've been told. You're pop Buddhism, but Christianity is like the only religion objectively that gives value and puts value on those society would cast out and called marginalized. It's the only one where a God made it possible to enter heaven. Every other religion is try hard and hope. This one is, doesn't matter how hard you try, you have no hope, so give up and repent, and it offers forgiveness. It's the only one with like a loving God that created you to be loved and to know Him. And yeah, and I understand people have hard times with churches and they've gone through bad times, and I'm empathetic to that. That sucks. I'm sorry Christians treated you so terribly and that you would not want to follow Jesus. Those Christians should be greatly ashamed, and I'm sure God has some thoughts for them as well when they stand before Him, and hopefully they repent and get it together before they meet Him. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. That's like saying someone at the gym was mean to me, so I'm never going to work out again. And it's like, well, the people doing the workouts don't speak for the fruit of the workouts. Like someone can be mean to you and be doing squats, and you can still do squats and see the growth, So don't conflate the way people who claim to follow Jesus have treated you. Now I understand it makes sense because Jesus says, like, what he says something like, let your love shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So Christians are supposed to do good works, and that's supposed to represent Jesus. So it makes sense why someone should assume, oh, Christians are supposed to look like Jesus, so how Christians treat me must be the fruit of their religion. I understand that thinking. It makes sense. We're here to try to bring some correction of that. Like some Christians suck and are also in the process of their own repentance and their own journey, and you might have just caught them at a bad time. And we're sorry that that's happened. But also, I would then push back as a loving brother and also say to you, person who's been hurt, have you ever hurt anyone? Like, you've hurt people too, and you wouldn't want to be judged for that one moment. And so we want to make sure we're not doing that to other people. So there's that. Derry just went green again. Feel like we're at a good spot, I think, to maybe end it. Or can you still hear us?
I can hear you.
I don't know why Derry's camera keeps going out. That's weird.
I'm back.
All right. Well, guys, it's about that time. It's almost an hour. We've been talking a lot about why Christianity is great. If you stuck around, thanks. I know sometimes people don't want to stick around for this stuff because they just can't stand to hear how good Christianity is. But if you stuck around and you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Helps get the word out and tells YouTube that people like listening to us, which we hope they do because we are talking about Jesus. Go share this with people who need to know why Christianity is great. Derry, you have any thoughts?
Yes, there are many reasons that you might be thinking of right now of like, well, you said a lot of things that Christians did or can do right, but there's just all these things that I have in my head that Christians have done wrong to me or I've seen them do wrong in the past. For sure. Like, we don't deny those things. We don't deny the hurt that's been done throughout all of human history by people who've been a part of religions or even been a part of Christianity. But by far, statistically, factually, not like just my opinion or anything, Christianity has easily done much more net good for all of human history than has done bad. We have done bad things. Religion in general has done bad things, but it doesn't mean that it's not still true, right? It doesn't mean that the people that did those bad things should be condemned for them, right? Not that they're like should go to hell. Every single person's done anything bad, because they have forgiveness still, right? If they didn't have forgiveness, then you could say yes. But they didn't do, when they did something bad, they didn't do something that God wanted them to do. So it doesn't mean just because they did something bad that Christianity is not true within itself, that it's not something you should still strive to follow, right? If you don't believe in Christianity, you're still going to do bad things. If you believe in Christianity, you're still going to do bad things, right? So either way, bad things are going to happen to you and you're going to do bad things to other people. But there is a better way to live, and there is, like we said, so many reasons to be a Christian, so much hope, love, and grace, and a good way to treat other people that you should want, and a history that you should want to be a part of. And so we don't deny the bad that's happened. We've apologized for it a lot on this channel, and people throughout history have apologized for it. And I know that if you were to talk to God, he would also apologize on behalf of the people who have done bad things in his name. So if you have those questions, we'd love to hear them. If you want to shoot us a DM or make a response video, and we'll make a video about it if you want to, or whatever you want to do, we'd love to have a conversation with you. If you want to be a Christian and you've watched this video, make a comment down below. We'll literally give you our email, our phone number, or whatever, and have conversations with you. We'd love to talk to you. So if you watch this and you're in that place, we're about to be real good friends if you want to reach out. So let us know.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's a great way to end.
Alrighty, y'all. Thanks for listening. Shoots.
Peace.